They only sit there when they've been told not to exist. The voice was quiet, almost apologetic, and it came from the woman no one had looked at in the last 12 minutes. Elias Vance paused mid-step. The Thalran Grand Concourse stretched endlessly around him. Arched ceilings of living crystal pulsing with soft violet light. Elegant alien figures drifting past in measured, effortless grace. Their movements were synchronized in a way that made the human eye uneasy, as if every gesture had been rehearsed generations in advance. Conversations flowed in melodic tones, layered with harmonic undertones that translated imperfectly through the neural band resting against Elias' temple. And yet, despite all of that beauty, all of that precision, there was a single empty space in the room. A seat, occupied, ignored. He turned toward the voice. She sat alone at the edge of a long, curved observation table, her posture careful, almost deliberately small, as if she were trying not to disturb the air around her. Her skin held a faint inner glow, pale silver threaded with soft currents of light beneath the surface. Her eyes, long, slightly angled, with delicate vein-like patterns shimmering within, lifted just enough to meet his. Then immediately dropped again. No one else reacted. Not a single Thalran even acknowledged that she had spoken. Elias glanced around, half expecting someone to correct him, to redirect him, to silently signal that he was about to violate some intricate social law. Instead, a nearby Thalran diplomat subtly shifted their stance, blocking his original path forward, guiding him away, not toward her, away from her. That was enough. He changed direction. The faintest ripple moved through the crowd, not visible, not audible, but perceptible in the way conversations faltered for half a second too long. A few elongated eyes flickered in his direction. Someone inhaled sharply. Elias reached the table. He looked at the empty seats, dozens of them arranged in perfect symmetry, and then, without hesitation, he pulled one back and sat down beside her. The sound of the chair contacting the crystalline floor was soft. But in the silence that followed, it might as well have been thunder. The woman stiffened. You don't have to do that," she said quickly, her voice barely above a whisper. "There are better places for you." Elias leaned back slightly, glancing at the vast window beyond them where distant stars shimmered against the void. "I like this view," he said. She blinked, confused. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Across the hall, a cluster of Thalran officials had gone completely still. Their luminous eyes were fixed, not on Elias, but on her, as if trying to understand why he would choose that seat. Elias rested his arms casually on the table. "I'm Elias," he said, a pause, longer this time. She hesitated as though the act of responding required permission she had never been given. "Elira," she finally said. The name seemed to linger in the air, fragile and unfamiliar. Elias nodded once, like it was the most normal exchange in the universe. "Well, Elira," he said, "it looks like we've both been strategically avoided." For the first time, something shifted, not in the room, in her. It was small, almost imperceptible, but the corners of her expression softened, caught somewhere between confusion and something dangerously close to amusement. "That is not inaccurate," she admitted. A faint sound escaped her then. Not quite a laugh, more like the memory of one. Across the concourse, a tall Thalran with elongated, glass-like irises turned sharply, their attention snapping toward Elias with unmistakable intensity. Elias noticed. Of course he did, he just didn't react. Instead, he gestured lightly toward the distant cluster of dignitaries. "Important people?" he asked. Her gaze flickered in that direction, then quickly away. "Yes," she said. "Very. And they're all pretending you're not here." That made her inhale, just slightly sharper than before. "They aren't pretending," she said quietly. "It's simply more efficient this way." Elias tilted his head. "Efficient for who?" She didn't answer, because she didn't need to. At that exact moment, one of the Thalran officials began moving toward them. Not quickly, not aggressively, but with the kind of deliberate precision that suggested this was not a casual decision. Elira noticed immediately. Her shoulders tensed, her posture folding inward again like a reflex she couldn't suppress. "You should go," she said under her breath, "before this becomes complicated." Elias followed her gaze. The approaching figure was tall even by Thalran standards, their luminous skin carrying a deeper, more pronounced glow. Subtle markings traced along their temples, status indicators if Elias remembered correctly. High-ranking. Possibly political, definitely not pleased. Elias looked back at Elira, then very calmly he shifted his chair just a fraction closer to hers. "No," he said. The word was soft, but it landed with weight. Elira froze. Not because of the approaching official, Because of him, no one had ever chosen to stay, not like that, not without hesitation. The official stopped a few steps away from the table. Their gaze moved over Elias first, measured, analytical, before sliding toward Elira with something colder, something dismissive. "Human," the official said, their voice smooth but edged with quiet disapproval. "There are designated areas for your delegation." Elias smiled slightly. "I must have missed the part where seating was restricted by species." A flicker, subtle but there, the official's eyes narrowed just enough to notice. "This area is reserved," they said. Elias glanced at the empty seats stretching across the table. "Looks pretty available to me." A pause, the air tightened. Around them, the entire concourse had begun to listen without appearing to listen. Elira's hands had curled slightly against the edge of the table. Waiting, bracing. The official took a step closer. And then their gaze shifted just briefly toward Elira again, and something changed. It was almost instinctual. A flicker of recognition they didn't understand. A hesitation they couldn't justify. Elias saw it, filed it away. Interesting, very interesting. He leaned forward slightly, resting his forearms on the table, completely at ease. "I'm good here," he said. "Thank you." Silence, longer this time. The official held his gaze. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away, not satisfied, not resolved, but withdrawn. The moment they disappeared back into the crowd, the tension didn't break. It shifted, because now everyone was watching, not openly, but enough. Elira exhaled slowly, like she had been holding her breath for far too long. "You shouldn't have done that," she said. Elias glanced at her. "Probably not." Another pause, then quieter. "Are you always like this?" He smiled faintly, only when something doesn't make sense. Her eyes lifted again, meeting his fully this time. "And this doesn't make sense to you." Elias studied her for a moment, the way the light moved beneath her skin, the way the entire room bent around her absence, the way a high-ranking official had just hesitated without knowing why. "No," he said. "It really does." The silence did not end when the official walked away. It settled, sharpened, and then spread. Elias could feel it in the way conversations resumed half a beat too late, in the way movement across the concourse became just slightly more deliberate, as if every Thalran present had quietly adjusted their awareness to include him, and more importantly, her. Elira didn't move for several seconds. Then slowly she drew her hands back from the table, folding them into her lap with practiced composure. "You've made this worse," she said, though there was no accusation in her tone, only certainty. Elias glanced sideways at her. "Worse than being invisible." Her lips parted, but no answer came, because that question didn't have a simple response. Before she could attempt one, a soft chime echoed through the concourse, low, harmonic, and immediately commanding attention. The violet light in the crystalline ceiling shifted, deepening into a richer hue as thin streams of energy traced along the architecture like veins awakening. The room changed, subtly, but completely. "They're beginning the assembly," Elira murmured, her voice tightening. "You shouldn't be here for this." Elias leaned back slightly, watching as Thalran officials began to move with synchronized precision toward the central chamber beyond the concourse. "I was invited," he said. She turned to him, startled. "No," she said immediately. "Humans are not invited to inner assemblies, not for another." She stopped herself, eyes narrowing slightly. "Not yet." Elias didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached into the inner lining of his jacket and pulled out a thin, translucent shard, no larger than his palm. It flickered faintly, displaying a sequence of symbols that shifted between human text and Thalran glyphs. Elira stared at it, her expression changed, not confusion, recognition. "That's," she hesitated, her voice dropping even further. "That's council-level authorization." Elias gave a small shrug. "Seems like someone wanted me inside." Her gaze snapped back to him, searching his face now, not dismissing him, not avoiding him, but studying him. "For what purpose?" "Still figuring that out," he said. That earned him a look, somewhere between disbelief and reluctant amusement. "You're attending a Thalran High Assembly," she said, "with no understanding of why you've been summoned. When you say it like that, it sounds reckless." "It is reckless." Elias smiled faintly. "Then I'm fitting in already." For a fraction of a second, she almost smiled again. Almost. But it vanished as quickly as it came when a new presence approached. This time, there was no subtlety. Two figures moved toward them in perfect unison, their steps measured, their posture unmistakably authoritative. Their skin carried a deeper luminescence than the others, with intricate geometric patterns pulsing faintly along their necks and temples, marks of high caste. Guards, but not soldiers, something more ceremonial, more dangerous. They stopped directly in front of the table. Both sets of eyes moved to Elias first, then inevitably to Elira, and again that flicker, that hesitation. One of them spoke, their voice smooth, almost artificial in its precision. "Human Delegate Elias Vance," they said. "Your presence has been acknowledged. You are to proceed to the inner chamber." Elias nodded casually. "Lead the way." Neither guard moved. Instead, their gaze shifted just slightly toward Elira. "She is not permitted," the second guard added. The words were directed at Elias, but the weight of them landed on her. Elira's posture tightened again, the fragile sense of presence she had begun to build folding inward under the familiar pressure of exclusion. Elias didn't stand, not yet. Instead, he tapped his fingers lightly against the table as if considering something trivial. "Then I'm not permitted either," he said. The guards went still, not confused, processing. "That is not the protocol," the first one replied. Elias looked up at them. "Then update it." A pause, the kind that stretched just a little too long. Around them, the movement toward the assembly had slowed again. Not stopped, but slowed enough to notice. The second guard's voice lowered slightly. "The assembly does not accommodate deviations." Elias tilted his head. "Funny," he said, "because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's built entirely on them." That earned him something new. Not just attention, not just tension, respect. It was subtle, barely there, but it passed between the two guards in a silent exchange. Then one of them spoke again. "You place significance where none exists," they said. Elias glanced at Elira, then back at them. "No," he said quietly. "I think you've been ignoring it." Elira's breath caught. The guards didn't respond immediately. But this time, when their gaze returned to her, it lingered, longer than before, studying, measuring. As if something about her, something they had dismissed 1,000 times, no longer aligned with what they thought they knew. The first guard straightened slightly. "Both of you," they said at last, "you will proceed." Elira blinked once, twice. She hesitated, clearly unprepared for this outcome. "There must be an error." "There is no error," the guard replied. Elias finally stood, smoothing his jacket as if this had been the expected result all along. "See," he said lightly, "protocol updated." Elira didn't move, not yet. Her eyes were fixed on the guards, on the space beyond them. On the chamber she had never been allowed to enter. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I'm not supposed to be seen in there." Elias stepped closer to her, not touching, not forcing, but present. "Then maybe it's time they see you." The words were simple, but they landed differently now. Because the room was already watching, because something had already started shifting, because for the first time in her life. The system had bent, even if just a little. Elira slowly rose to her feet. The movement felt heavier than it should have, like stepping into gravity she had never been allowed to experience. The guards turned without another word, leading them toward the inner chamber. As they walked, the concourse parted, not dramatically, not obviously, but enough. Enough that there was a clear path, enough that no one stood too close, enough that every eye, no matter how carefully controlled, followed them, not the human, her. Elias noticed. Of course he did. He leaned slightly toward her as they walked. "Still think you're not supposed to be here?" he murmured. Elira didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was forward now, steady, uncertain, but no longer lowered. "I don't know what I'm supposed to be anymore," she admitted. Elias smiled faintly. "Good," he said, "means they don't either." Ahead of them, the entrance to the inner chamber opened. Vast, radiant, and impossibly intricate. Its surface shifting like liquid crystal as it recognized the approaching guards. As it recognized Elias, and then, it hesitated just for a fraction of a second before opening fully. Elira saw it, her breath caught again. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Elias didn't look surprised. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I was wondering when that would happen." She turned to him, eyes wide. "What does that mean?" But Elias didn't answer, because beyond the threshold, the heart of the Thalran Empire was waiting. And for the first time in generations, it was reacting to her. The moment they stepped inside, the entire chamber fell silent. It wasn't gradual. It wasn't subtle. It was absolute. A vast circular hall unfolded before them, layered in ascending rings of translucent platforms where Thalran elites stood in perfect formation, their luminous forms casting shifting reflections across the living walls. At the center, a suspended dais hovered above a slow ing core of light, an ancient energy construct, humming with quiet authority, older than any living memory. Every eye turned, not to Elias, to her. Elira stopped. The weight of it hit all at once, not the dismissal she had known her entire life, not the absence of attention, but the opposite. Recognition without understanding, focus without permission. Her breath faltered. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered, though her voice carried farther than she intended, echoing faintly through the chamber. A ripple passed through the assembly. Elias remained beside her, calm, grounded, as if the pressure in the room simply didn't apply to him. "That's the second time you've said that," he murmured. "Still doesn't make it true." From the highest tier, a figure stepped forward. They were unmistakable. Taller than the rest, their presence refined into something almost ethereal, their skin glowing with a deeper, steadier radiance. Fine, crown-like filaments extended subtly from their temples, marking them as one of the ruling council, perhaps more. When they spoke, their voice resonated through the chamber without amplification. "Human Elias Vance," they said, "you were granted audience, you were not granted disruption." Elias inclined his head slightly. "Then it's a good thing I didn't come for permission." A murmur stirred, quickly suppressed. The figure's gaze shifted. Settled on Elira. And there it was again, that flicker. But this time it didn't fade, it grew. Something ancient, buried beneath generations of certainty, was surfacing, and it terrified them. "You," the figure said slowly, as if testing the word itself. "State your designation." Elira's throat tightened. Designation. Not name. Never name. Her instinct was to lower her gaze, to make herself smaller, to disappear into the silence she had lived in for so long. But she didn't, not this time. "Elira," she said, her voice trembled. But it did not break. The chamber reacted, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to feel the shift. The central core of light pulsed, once, twice. Then it changed. The soft violet glow deepened into a brilliant, radiant silver, threads of light extending outward, reaching toward the platforms, toward the council. And then, toward her, Elira stepped back instinctively, her breath catching. "What is?" The light stopped just short of her, hovering, waiting. The entire chamber froze, the ruling figure's expression, controlled, composed for centuries, cracked. "Impossible," they whispered. Elias didn't look surprised, not even slightly. He stepped forward just enough to be heard. "Your empire is built on continuity, isn't it?" he said. "Lineage, memory, inheritance." No one interrupted him, because no one could. "You didn't lose your royal line," Elias continued quietly. "You buried it." The words landed like impact. The light surged. This time it didn't stop. It reached her, wrapped around her, not violently, not forcefully, but with recognition. Elira gasped as the glow intensified, the faint patterns beneath her skin igniting, no longer soft, no longer hidden, but brilliant, intricate, unmistakable. The chamber reacted instantly. Several figures stepped back. Others lowered their gaze, not out of fear, out of instinct, out of something far older than their politics. The ruling figure staggered half a step, their voice losing its certainty. This is a misinterpretation of." "It's not," Elias said. For the first time there was no humor in his tone, no lightness, only certainty. "She's not insignificant," he said. "She's the reason your system ever worked." Elira stood at the center of it all, trembling, not with weakness, but with the overwhelming force of something she had never been allowed to feel. Presence, she looked around, at the faces that had never seen her, at the eyes that now couldn't look away, at the space that had always excluded her, and was now reshaping itself around her. Her voice faltered, then steadied. "I don't understand this." Elias turned to her, and for the first time there was something softer in his expression. "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to stop pretending you're less than what you are." The light around her pulsed again. This time it responded to her, not the chamber, not the council, her. The ruling figures slowly lowered their head, just slightly, but enough. It spread. One by one across the chamber the Thalrin followed, not commanded, not forced, compelled. By recognition, by truth, by something they had spent generations trying to erase and had failed to destroy. Elira's breath hitched as she watched it happen, all of them, all at once, seeing her, not as absence, not as inconvenience, but as something undeniable, something central, something royal. Tears blurred her vision, but she didn't look away. She couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Elias remained beside her, hands at his sides, completely still. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because this moment, this shift, was never about him. It was about the woman who had been nothing to everyone, until someone chose to see her. And once she was seen, the entire empire had no choice but to follow.